Hey everybody, thanks for checking out the first episode of the Bolts and Colts podcast. Before we get into it, I just kind of wanted to give a little bit of context for this first episode. It is coming in hot. Brian and I wanted to record this show several times over the past couple weeks, but we didn't get a chance to record it until last night. So this first episode is a bit of a ramble. It's kind of our origin story and season preview, and it's a little bit all over the place. The show will get a little bit more structured as we go forward, but this is really kind of what it is. It's two guys who played high school football together, who each grew up loving one of these teams and now have a reason to root for both of these teams together. And so I'm really excited for going through this season because it is such a unique season, and really excited to connect with a lot of Colts fans, a lot of Chargers fans, and a lot of Philip Rivers fans who are adopting the Colts as their team this year. So one quick thing I wanted to mention is that at the end of this episode, we talked about where people can get in touch with us. I had not yet set up a Facebook group, but I have now. And so if you go to facebook.com/groups/BoltsNColts, you will be able to join the Facebook community for this podcast, and we can all have great conversations about the teams and the players that we love for the rest of the season. So check us out there. Thanks for listening. Without further ado, here's our first episode.
God. Let's go, huh? Let's go.
Welcome, everyone, to the very first episode 0, if you will, even, of the Bolts and Colts podcast. This is Brian Latenry, and I am joined here by a guy that I haven't talked to in person in probably a couple of years, but played high school football with and is a diehard Colts fan, and that is Mr. Brian Riley. How are you today, sir?
I'm good, Brian. How are you?
I'm great, man. And it's kind of wild. I think we're just going to put it out there right up front. Like, this is going to be a bit of a wild ride, this podcast. This was a situation where you and I obviously are lifelong football fans, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you have been a lifelong Colts fan. I have been a lifelong Chargers fan. When Philip Rivers ended his 16-year tenure with the San Diego and now Los Angeles Chargers and went to the Colts to play for, former coordinator Frank Reich, who is now the head coach of the Colts, the first thing I thought of was, I got to see what Brian thinks about this. And then not only had that thought crossed my mind, then you were already texting me about that, and you were already reaching out and saying, holy crap. And it was kind of amazing. And so we'll talk about that stuff in a minute. But the idea to do this podcast was basically like two guys that grew up in Enfield, Connecticut, that didn't root for the local team, happened one to be a Colts fan, the other to be a Chargers fan. And here we are 30 years later, and everything's come full circle. And that really was the impetus for us having this podcast. I mean, we haven't even really talked about what this show is yet, other than that. And so I don't even know where to start, man. I guess a place to start would be just to set the stage for the audience. You and I met in high school when we both played for the Enfield Raiders football team. And that was so many years ago now that it's scary to even think about. But you played quarterback and I played offensive tackle. And I knew, just because you were one of the only kids in school who didn't root for either the Giants or the Patriots, the hometown teams. There was a lot of Broncos fans back then because the Broncos were good at that time, the John Elway era. But I guess a good place to start would be, why Colts? You're in Enfield, Connecticut. Why were you a Colts fan growing up?
You know what? That's a great question. And when I think back about fans of football teams, there wasn't really a lot of Patriot fans. And if they were, they weren't vocal about being a Patriot fan like they are today. But I was born and raised Baltimore Colts fan from my dad. He raised me to like Johnny Unitas and Burt Jones, all those guys, man. Like, so I've followed Colts ever since they packed up that Mayflower truck, drove to Indianapolis, and I stuck with them, man. Like, we've had a good little run. But yeah, man, it was so weird growing up in Connecticut. And as you know, it was almost impossible to get Chargers or Colts gear. Like,
Oh, dude.
People forget there was no Amazon and there was no internet.
No.
And we had to call people in those states to see if they could buy the jacket or a jersey at a local JCPenney's. And then they shipped it to us.
I remember you having a Jeff George jersey at one point. And I can't remember what year that was, but I remember you having a Jeff George jersey at some point. And we had one, it wasn't even a sporting goods store in town, but there was a store in the mall that used to sell team gear. And that was the only place you could go in town, because this was obviously pre-internet. That was the only place you can go in town to get anything related to a team that wasn't one of the local teams. And so I remember getting a Billy Ray Smith T-shirt. It was like a jersey looking. There was a lot of people had shirts back then that were just T-shirts, but that looked like a jersey, and it was like 3/4 sleeve, and it was a Billy Ray Smith. It didn't even have its name on it. It only had his number 54 on it, and that was the first piece of Chargers gear that I got. And I'll never forget when I went to a preseason game at the Patriots' old stadium. Billy Ray Smith was there. I went to see them play the Chargers, and Billy Ray Smith was there, and he literally saw me and came up to me and said, "Where in the hell did you get a Billy Ray Smith shirt?" And I remember telling him that it was obviously I was saying I was a big fan and stuff like that, but I remember telling him there was like one store in town, and then of course we had the Starter outlet in New Haven, Connecticut, and if you could get somebody to give you a ride down there, I would go and I would get all the defective stuff, or things that had a little sort of error in them or stuff like that. So I still have for years I had the Charger satin jacket, the one they used to wear on the sidelines with the lightning bolts over the shoulders, and it had like one button hole that was punched like in the seam, right? You couldn't tell when you looked at it. I also had a Padres one because I'm a diehard Padres fan as well, and the orange and blue. But I would go down to the Starter outlet and I would grab whatever I could. I remember ordering, I think through a catalog, the Starter bomber jacket, the pullover.
Yes.
Which you had the Colts one, I'm sure,
I
had
right? I had the Colts one where you stick your hands in the middle of it. I remember it.
I still have the Chargers one.
Oh,
I'll have to take a picture of it and post it. I literally still have the exact one. It's over 30 years old. It's probably the stuffing inside is probably just dust now. It's probably not even cotton anymore. But but it was, I mean, you hit it on the head, dude. It was a time where we would, whatever we could get our hands on from that team. And this was before their iconic players. And I should step back a bit and say my story mirrors yours in the sense that my father was a Chargers fan. He was a Dan Fouts fan specifically because he was also a Patriots fan, and he still to this day is a Patriots fan. But he was a big Dan Fouts fan. And when I would watch games with him and knew that was a team that he liked, I of course started to like them too, and it was the lightning bolts, and it was the uniforms, and it was Dan Fouts, who to me just looked like a guy who could have been any one of our next door neighbors that literally just rolled off the couch on Sunday morning, threw football pads on, and went out and threw for 400 yards. I just loved that about Dan Fouts. I just loved that he looked like everyone else. He was not like, he didn't look like some super athlete. He didn't look like, he looked like your next door neighbor, and he was one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And I'm not a fan of Ben Roethlisberger, but it was that kind of a build, where it was just kind of like he just had a cannon for an arm. And I freaking love that. And so I just fell in love with the Chargers, and becoming obsessed with them as a team. It was like tunnel vision. That was just my team from then on. And so I was the only kid in middle school, which is probably where it really started to really click, is, late elementary school, middle school. And then by the time I got to high school, like that was my team, and I didn't care about any other team. And so being that kid who was the one fan of the Chargers, and then knowing you, who was literally the one fan of the Colts, that was it. We were the guys that rooted for the teams that nobody else rooted for. And I kind of loved that. And even when I went to college, and I went to college in Massachusetts, there was one other kid I met in all 4 years of my college career that was a Chargers fan. His name was Jay Sylvie. he'll never hear this show, but his name was Jay Sylvie. I literally ran after him one day in the campus center because I saw someone walk by with a Chargers jacket on. And I happened to work at the library at the college that I was at, Westfield State. And I ran after him screaming, like, is that a Chargers coat? Is that a Chargers coat? Because and I still to this day will do that. If I will accost people in public if I see them wearing something that has to do with the Chargers. And we became fast friends. And he was the only person I could commiserate with the year that the Chargers got destroyed by the Niners in the Super Bowl. Like, we were so ecstatic because we were in college and we had gone home for break when, the Chargers made it, and we were like calling each other and stuff. And, we became like best friends, and then of course commiserated over the, beating that they took in that Super Bowl. But that was one of the things I felt like for you and I sort of made us kindred spirits, was that we had these teams where we were like the lone representative of them. And obviously being on the football field and playing football, we talked about that a lot, And so, I just whenever I saw, even to this day, whenever I see anything having to do with the Colts, I think of you.
Same with me. It's crazy. Every time I see, like what happened with Rivers, like you were the first person I reached out to because I knew that connection that you and I had from back in 1991. And I think you had a much better run than the Colts did. Early 90s, late 90s, we started to get okay. But the Colts, when I was in high school, they weren't very good. Like, they were maybe a 3 or 4 win team every year. A couple, maybe 1 or 2 years, they performed better than they were supposed to. It wasn't until that year with Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh. And Brad, did he play for the Chargers?
He did play for the Chargers.
Was it before or after the Colts?
I think it was after the Colts. And now this is a good time to mention to people that, and we talked about this before we started, but we are not by any stretch of the imagination like experts on these teams. But what we are is diehard fans who have sort of loved these teams throughout our lives. And I think for the two of us, like, I think of sort of 3 groups of fans right now who might be listening to this show, and trust me, it will get more organized as we go forward. But I think there's like 3 types of fans out there. There's the people who loved the San Diego Chargers, and much like when your Colts moved, they lost a big chunk of their fan base. When the Chargers moved, they lost a big chunk of their fan base. And some might argue that fan base wasn't that big to begin with, but there are people who boycotted the Chargers after they moved to LA, right? So there's those people who have kind of been people without a team. And I think for Phillip Rivers moving over to the Colts represent for them a team that they can root for this year because they love Phillip, but they were not going to support the Chargers after they moved to LA. So there's that group of fans, which I think will gravitate towards following the Colts this year. Then there's the Chargers fans, of which I am a lifelong Chargers fan and have still followed them to LA, who absolutely love Rivers. He's my favorite Charger of all time now. It went from, Fouts to Junior Seau to now Phillip Rivers, and wanting to see him succeed wherever he goes, right, until his career is over. And so there's that group of fans. And then there's Colts fans who love the Colts and are either optimistic or at least curious about how Phillip Rivers is going to do this year for them, maybe even excited about how Phillip Rivers is going to do this year for them, and probably, if they're on Twitter at all, kind of surprised at this migration of Chargers fans that have sort of come into the community of the Colts, kind of jumping on the bandwagon because they want to see Phillip Rivers succeed. So there's kind of these different groups of fans out there. And this podcast is really about all of that. It's about the fact that this is in so many ways a unique football season, right? With COVID and everything else, but just you got a guy who played 16 years for the Chargers and is the consecutive games in a row leader in the NFL, a Hall of Famer, and now hoping to make one last run with a brand new team, which is just a wild storyline there. There's so much to talk about, but yes, he played for Jim Harbaugh, played for the Chargers in 1999 and 2000. And he played for the Colts from 94 to 97. So he went Colts, Ravens, Chargers. And then I think that might have been, and of course now, everybody knows him as the coach, Jim Harbaugh. and probably his brother is maybe more famous than him now, if not as famous as
As
him
a
now.
coach, absolutely.
I think Jim Harbaugh is seen as kind of a little bit crazy now, and John is seen as the more level-headed and sort of capable coach. I think now,
Right.
but yeah. So you go back to Harbaugh comes along to the Colts, and that's when you guys ran into some success.
Yeah, we had some success, and then it kind of dwindled after that. And then we drafted Peyton, and then we had Peyton for the longest time. Then we had Andrew Luck. Like, we've had great quarterbacks in Indy for probably just as long as Philip's been in San Diego.
But just think about what you just said there, dude. Now, when you think about these teams and how crazy, when we say it came full circle with Philip Rivers going to the Colts, I mean, think about the Ryan Leaf, Peyton Manning. And by the way, Ryan Leaf is a whole other topic we can talk about. But I will say, if you haven't followed Ryan Leaf's story and seen the redemption story that it is now, there was a series or a special they did on ESPN about him. He's amazing now. If you're on Twitter, you should totally follow him on Twitter. He's really turned his life around, does college commentating now, I believe, but speaks to groups of troubled youth and stuff like that. I mean, just like a riches to rags to riches sort of story again. Really kind of amazing. But that right there, that day, just sort of brings those two franchises together forever. Then, of course, his brother getting drafted when Philip Rivers does, and the whole trade with the New York Giants. Like the legacies of these two teams are weirdly intertwined.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of crazy.
And I'm glad you mentioned Ryan Leaf, because I mean, a lot of people forget how talented he really is. Like, that guy had every single tool coming out of college, and it was a 50-50 split before the Colts took Manning. Like, I don't think anyone knew.
It was 1 and 1A.
Yeah.
Yep.
And again, talk about arms. Like, man, Leaf had top 5 arms that I've ever seen, and what a talent that guy was. And I'm glad he turned his life around. And I did see that documentary on ESPN, and I am a fan of Ryan Leaf. I'm glad he turned it around. Yeah, man. So I'm glad you called that out.
Because he was, I mean, you think of the biggest busts of all time. You think of Todd Marinovich. You think of Ryan Leaf. You think of who was the humongous lineman, Tony
Mandarich, wasn't he?
Tony Mandarich. Yep. Tony Mandarich, biggest bust of all time. And then not Stone Cold. He was in the movie Stone Cold.
Brian Bosworth?
Yeah, Brian Bosworth.
Brian Bosworth. Yep.
Yes, Brian Bosworth. Like, those are the guys that off the top of my head, like when you say biggest bust of all time, they're in that. But Leaf, you could certainly make the case, was given what they thought he was going to be, and given, as you mentioned, on draft day, that he was considered by everyone. Those were both considered like can't lose picks. Like, it didn't matter. Like, whatever. And I just remember that being like, okay, well, whatever the Colts do, like the Chargers, they're fine. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it literally didn't matter at that time which one you were going to get, because either one, you had a franchise quarterback and you were going to be set for years and years and years. And of course, they couldn't have been more opposite, right? And I think looking back on it, just the maturity, which you can probably attribute to the fact that the Manning family legacy of football and just the experience around the game, what that meant for Peyton Manning's poise and maturity and being ready for that level. And when you look at where Leaf really struggled, right, which was they were 1 in 15, I think in that first season. It was just a situation where he just wasn't ready. He wasn't ready.
He wasn't mentally ready.
Right.
Like, physically, he was dialed in, but mentally, and it just shows you the difference between a college game and the NFL game, just how mentally strong you have to be.
Yeah. And so, obviously you kind of mentioned that they draft Peyton Manning, and the rest is history, right? I mean, the Colts go on to be, to have a series of successful years. You could certainly, talk about their struggles against certain teams and things like that. And the Chargers, I think in some senses kind of had their number when it came to the playoffs and things like that. But you had a great run with Peyton Manning. You had a good run with Andrew Luck, and now you're sort of in this transition phase, right? Where, Rivers is this year and maybe next year. If this year goes well, I can't see him playing more than, who knows, let's say 3 years absolute max, but you could say probably this year and maybe next year if this year goes well and he's still healthy. And then you guys drafted a quarterback, didn't you, in the draft this year?
We drafted that kid Eason.
Right.
And I think he's out of Washington, cannon arm. What a quarterback to learn behind, right, in Rivers. But this kid's going to be good, but he's going to need a few years. And I think Rivers will give us at least 2 years. And then we'll see what happens after that. But I don't think this is his last year with the Colts. I think he's going to give us 2 years and then hopefully groom Eason, and then we'll be ready after that.
I mean, of the situations that Rivers could have gone into this year, obviously the Titans were one and this was another one. And I just feel like with Reich, this is the best possible situation for him for not only that reason, but because comparatively his offensive line is such an upgrade coming to the Colts than it was over with the Chargers. And, we'll talk about like this upcoming week in a second, because we're in week 1 now. We had when we say we're kind of building the airplane while we're flying it, like we were going to record like 2 times before this and stuff like that. But and there's so much ground that we want to cover, but we'll talk about sort of our season predictions in a minute. But yeah, just this situation in this offseason, COVID aside, just like Rivers going there, the Chargers drafting Herbert, Tyrod Taylor getting the nod to starting quarterback. I mean, both of these, and I was looking at the power rankings for the Colts and the Chargers, and Sporting News had them at like 19 and 20. I forget. I think the Colts might have been 19, Chargers might have been 20 in terms of power rankings. So there's a lot of doubters out there about what these teams are going to do, and especially now on the Charger side with some of the injuries that they've had. And so their franchises are kind of in transition, right? They have drafted young talent, but that young talent is going to take a couple years to come to fruition. And the goal is to be competitive at this particular time as we're sort of transitioning to that younger crew that's coming in. And it's going to be a fascinating season to watch. And I think what the goal of this podcast will be is for all the Chargers fans and for all the Colts fans and for everybody who's kind of a little bit of both. We'll talk about the games every week through the lens of the Chargers and the Colts. We'll talk about what we're seeing with those teams, how what we're hearing as fans of the teams and stuff like that. We'll probably talk a little fantasy football because we both are in a fantasy football league together this year. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. And of course, we'll talk about what else is going on in the NFL. And that's kind of the flow of the show this year. But there's so many things I wanted to hit on with you tonight.
Hey, bro, can I mention something? Can I maybe,
fire away,
if
dude.
You don't mind, a big thank you to Chuck Pagano and Ryan Grigson for completely ruining Andrew Luck's career.
Oh, can we talk about that?
Yes, I would love to talk about that because I think what Chris Ballard has done with this team and how he's designed it and how he's built it and how he's just totally dismantled everything that Grigson did is the best thing that could have happened to the Colts. And the only thing that bothers me is the fact that Andrew Luck is sitting at home somewhere, and I'm glad he's being a dad. He's doing his thing, but he got ruined. He got ruined by Grigson. He did not build that team the way he should have. He was playing with a rookie quarterback for the salary cap hit. There is zero excuse for Ryan Grigson on what he did to the Colts and what he did to Andrew Luck. Him and Meccano got exactly what they deserved. And I've always thought like what Andrew Luck could be doing with probably the best line in the NFL right now. The Colts have probably the best line, them and the Cowboys. But like when you talk line and just nastiness, who do you think of, Brian? You're a lineman.
Well, I think of the Hogs from the Redskins.
The Hogs of the Redskins. And then this kid, Quentin Nelson, is a beast. He's an animal. And yeah, man, I just wish I could see Andrew play behind this line. That really bothers me.
Well, make no mistake, that is the thing that I'm most excited about with Rivers coming over here, because that is something. And again, we talk about the fates of these two teams being intertwined, right? You look at the career of Andrew Luck, it's like a Grant Hill situation, right? It is if the guy could have stayed healthy, if the guy had the right people around him, what could he have done in his career? And I often say, as a Chargers fan, that the Chargers just wasted a Hall of Fame career by Phillip Rivers. The fact that they don't have a Super Bowl now, at least one Super Bowl by now, is an absolute travesty. And a lot of that can be attributed to the fact that he really hasn't had an offensive line in front of him that was worthy of him. And some of it's due to injuries. Some of it's due to a lot of it, I feel, is due to not investing in the line. And Chargers aren't the only team that don't do that. I mean, we just talked about how that was the problem with the Colts as well. I don't understand how you can put together a football team and not start with the offensive line and the defensive line. That is where the game is won and lost every single week. And watching these, I mean, look at Cam Newton and, the beating that he's taken over his career. It'll be interesting to see what he does with the Patriots this year. But you look at these guys who have just never been able to truly have the time to showcase their skills, never been truly had the consistent line in front of them to really be as successful as they could have been. And in the case of Andrew Luck, I mean, yeah, they wasted that guy's career. Not only did they waste it, they shortened it. They ruined, as you mentioned, ruined it. They basically ruined his career.
They ruined his career.
Whereas with the Chargers, I feel like they wasted his career. Granted, as a fan, I love Phillip Rivers. All the memories that I have of him will last forever. But I feel terrible for Rivers that they never put a line in front of him that was worthy of the talent that they had on the rest of that team, right? And so it's awesome to see him come over to the Colts now and to think at the time in his career where he needs a great line the most, he's getting a great line. And they have enough talent on the offensive side of the ball there where they could do some damage. And I'm excited. Well, we'll talk about sort of what we're excited about on these things too. But just Phillip Rivers' tenure with the Chargers for me is one of unfulfilled potential, and you really can't look at the Chargers overall as a team without talking about injuries, because I feel like I can't think of another team, and I'm probably biased, but I cannot think of another team that is as snake bitten by injuries as the Chargers are year in and year out. It's just amazing to me. I just watched the Hard Knocks episode where Derwin went down again, right? And, prior to this, you could just tell, dude, he was on the verge. I mean, he was already amazing, but it was all coming together this year. He was going to go out there and absolutely dominate this year. And on that defense, they were going to be hell. And to see the poor kid go down and out for the entire season, like, it's just amazing. In the past, it's Hunter Henry. In the past, Derwin James before. It's been Keenan Allen before. Yep. Yeah, like, dude, it's just they just can't. And then linemen every year by the half dozen. They lose half of their line all the time. I mean, going into and it just never ends, dude. Going into this week's starting, I had it pulled up, but their center, Mike Pouncey, who, all pro, out. Brian Beluga, one of the tackles that they brought in to play this year, questionable, probably not going to play. And another guy, a guard, I believe, on the line is questionable as well. So one guy definitely out. Two other members of the line maybe not playing this week. And that's the line that Tyrod Taylor is going to go and step up, and step behind and get his first, start under. So it's just crazy to me. Mike Williams, their other 1,000-yard receiver, is going to play, it looks like, but has been limited in practice because of a shoulder injury. Also, that was something that you saw on Hard Knocks. So it's just the Chargers and injuries. It seems like every year we're talking about, like, man, they got to fire their strength and conditioning guys. They got to fire the medical staff. Like, every year they're getting guys injured in camp. I mean, this was like, if you watch the Hard Knocks episode, like, it's literally right after Anthony Lynn is like, okay, we're doing this one full speed, contact, all that kind of stuff. Boom. It wasn't even a contact injury. He just, like, it's just heartbreaking. but that's the thing about Phillip Rivers' tenure with the Chargers is that you have this guy who I believe wholeheartedly is a Hall of Fame quarterback, and how you could not put the team around him once, twice, three times during the time that he was there to really make that deep run in the playoffs is just beyond me. And last year was just a travesty. I live in Massachusetts, but I work for a place out in California. And over the last couple of years, I've been fortunate enough to be able to go out there. And I got to see the Chargers play against the Broncos at home this past season. It was probably the worst game they played all year. And that was the last game I got to see, with Rivers. And so that was a huge bummer. But I freaking love the guy. And that's why when they announced that he was going over to the Colts, I was like, of course I'm going to root for the Colts this year. I have to root for the Colts this year. I freaking love Phillip Rivers, and I want to see him succeed. And so, you being a lifelong Colts fan, you look at that team this year. What are some things that you're excited about other than obviously Rivers come in? And just like to go back to the Rivers thing, like looking at it from the outside, how do you feel about Rivers coming in? Like, what are your expectations for him as a Colts fan?
They're high, but I have to be honest with you, Bri. When everything went down, it was around the same time where Cam Newton was a free agent, when Tom Brady was a free agent, and there was a lot of unknown about where people were going. And there was a lot of rumors with Tom Brady potentially going over to the Colts, or Cam Newton, or Phillip Rivers. It was at the end where his name kept popping up as far as coming over to the Colts. And I got to be honest, man, I'm a Manning fan, but I've seen what Brady can do. In my opinion, I might kill you. I think Brady is the greatest quarterback I've ever seen.
This is going to be the last episode of this podcast. I hate to say it. I thought we were going to get through the season. We're not.
And I stopped being a hater. I stopped as soon as Peyton retired.
See, I haven't. I haven't,
man.
dude. I have never stopped being a hater, and I'll tell you why. It's because I still live in Massachusetts. How long ago did you move out of the area?
In 2000.
Okay, so you've been out of the area for a long time, right? You haven't had to live with Patriots fans for the past 20 years.
But I see it all on social media.
Dude,
I see how obnoxious they are. They're obnoxious.
It wasn't until I went to college, and this was during the Bledsoe era, but it wasn't until I went to college that I actively started to hate the New England Patriots.
Oh, yeah.
But being surrounded by Patriots fans all the time, and to be honest with you, the thing that broke I'll never, ever root for the Patriots ever.
Neither will I. I'll never root for the Patriots. You have my word on this.
But here's what did it for me. It was the way they treated Drew Bledsoe when he got hurt. And that, because it's such a perfect encapsulation of what a New England / Boston sports fan is. They're so fickle. The second that Bledsoe got hurt and Brady came in and showed any kind of promise, it was as if Drew Bledsoe was a bum. It was like he had never done anything worth mentioning in his entire life. They basically they treated him like Bill Buckner. They ran him out of town. And then I actually was at the game where, because I think it was the game that they played the Chargers at the new Gillette Stadium, where they honored Drew Bledsoe at halftime or something like that years later. But I'll tell you, dude, they were awful. The fan base was awful to Drew Bledsoe in that whole period of time. And then when the Patriots started to win, they just became insufferable, just insufferable. And so I couldn't stand them and could never really acknowledge, Tom Brady. Here's the thing about Brady, and you tell me, you're a quarterback, so you're looking at this differently than I am anyways. I was a lineman, for crying out loud. But what always struck me about the Patriots is that they had a very simple offense. And Tom Brady's role in that offense was to throw the ball 7 yards or less. And he's brilliant and is such a great getting to the line and surveying what the defense is giving him and making the right call and making the right throw to the right receiver or the right back at the right time, and the timing that he had with those receivers and everything else. Like, they ran that offense like a machine.
Yeah.
But it was an offense to me that was more about the system than it was about the quarterback.
Well, let's not forget, was it Matt Castle won like 12 games with that same system.
That's what I'm saying.
Listen, I get it. I'll never root for the Patriots. I can't stand the Patriots. I can't stand their fans. But the one thing that I think I started to recognize with Tom Brady's greatness is he was a lot older than everybody. And every year they said, no chance, no chance. And then when he hit 41, 42, I was like, wow, like I can relate to this guy. I'm getting older. We're all getting older. And for him to keep to be playing on this level we've never seen anything like this. So that's why I became such a Brady fan. And I realized how great he was with the weapons around him. Like there was only a couple of years, Bri, where he had that legit number one receiver. Like he's always had Gronk, but Moss. But for the most part, if you compare offensive weapons that Peyton had and then Tom had,
for sure, dude,
I would have to give the nod to Peyton, and Peyton was a genius. Like the way he saw the defense.
No, I agree
I'm
with you.
Questioning
he
that.
had better. I think Peyton had better weapons.
Yeah.
For the most part, I think overall, I would give the weapons to Peyton. I do feel like Brady always had a quality offensive line. I wouldn't say they were like we talked about the Hogs or the Redskins and stuff like that. I wouldn't say that they were always considered to be one of the best lines in the NFL, but I felt like he always had a decent offensive line because he's never been a super mobile quarterback. But the other thing about the Patriots offense is it's designed so that the ball is out of his hands in 2 to 3 seconds. There's not time for a team to reach him.
Right.
And it infuriates me because I have to watch the Patriots every single week. But the thing that kills me about the Patriots and the way that no one plays them effectively on defense is that that's a team where if you're a defensive lineman, you got to engage to the count of 2 in your head and then literally jump up in the air with your hands up and block the passing lanes. And you would see times where like the Bills would get into a groove with that and they'd bat down 4 or 5 passes and they'd make it difficult. But like you have every team who for 20 years now has tried to rush the passer in an offense where the passer is never going to have the ball by the time you get to him. Like I almost feel like they played right into their hands, and it's just infuriating to watch because it's just this death by 1,000 cuts. And it's just infuriating to watch them do that to teams every week and teams not effectively game plan against it. But anyways, I am interested to see what Brady does with the Bucs this year. Because this is the year where if he goes out, and they're talking about the Tampa Bay going to the freaking Super Bowl.
I know.
I mean, a team that wasn't in that conversation last year. So if he takes them if he wins their division and takes them to the playoffs and makes a deep run, I mean, he doesn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. But I think even haters like me will have to tip our hat.
I think you have to tip your hat. And I think I'm going back a little bit and I'm going to follow it up. But the one thing that Brady had that Manning didn't was Belichick. And the only time that Manning competed or beat Brady is when he had Tony Dungy on the sidelines.
Yep.
So that coach, that X Factor coach, I hate to admit it, you got to give it to Belichick. Belichick has always had his teams ready. His line, they always knew their assignments. Like it just seems Belichick and his coaching staffs were dialed in. Now, regardless of what anyone thinks of Belichick, his teams were always ready to play. And it's going to be interesting. So let me ask you this, Bri. What's more impressive to you? Is it going to be a farther run in the playoffs with Tom Brady or a farther run in the playoffs as a Patriots with Bill Belichick?
I think I'm going to be more impressed if Brady has a deeper run in the playoffs because I expect, and I hate the Patriots, but I expect until Bill Belichick is no longer there, that they will be in the playoffs every year and they will be pushing for winning the conference every year. And because I believe, and maybe this is just what I've told myself over all these years because I didn't like Tom Brady, I believe that system is so good that as long as you have a competent quarterback that can play within that system, they are going to have success because for 20 years, no one has proven to be able to stop it.
Yeah,
and
nobody.
So I expect that the Patriots are going to be good this year. And the question mark for me is whether or not Brady can pull it off with Tampa. Now, they obviously just signed Fournette. They had a pretty good team around him before that. He's got Gronk back. Gronk is not Gronk of old, but I'd still put him in top 10 tight ends in the league. if he's healthy. And I think Brady's going to throw him a ton of balls, and I think he's super energized being there and playing with Tom again. So I expect Tampa Bay to be good, and I expect the Patriots to be good. It's going to be interesting. But you mentioned something that I think is super relevant to the Chargers as well, and that is, who you have on the sidelines. And to me, where the Chargers cursed their organization
I know
to
what you're
this
going to say.
day,
I know what you're going to say. Go ahead.
Marty Schottenheimer.
Yes, 100%.
When you because you just talked about Bill Belichick, right? Always had them prepared to play, not a heavily penalized team. That is who Marty Schottenheimer was. And after hating him for years because he was such a good coach for the Chiefs, getting him on the Chargers, because he didn't get along with A.J. Smith, having his tenure with the Chargers cut so short after the season that they had because they lost in the playoffs before they were supposed to, and because the two of them didn't get along, was the worst mistake the Chargers have ever made. Just like absolute worst mistake the Chargers have ever made. And although I will say this, I feel that Anthony Lynn is the best head coach they've had since Marty Schottenheimer. And this is his fourth year. And this is going to be a transition year. Like, I don't expect the Chargers to go to the Super Bowl this year. I really do believe in Anthony Lynn as the head coach of the Chargers now, but it has been a long damn time. I mean, you're talking about North Turner. You're talking about Mike McCoy. There's been some shit coaches of the Chargers over the years. And Anthony Lynn, I like. I'm interested to see what other Chargers fans think of Anthony Lynn as a head coach. I freaking love him. And watching the Hard Knocks series this past few weeks has only made me love him even more. So I'm excited about that. But a lot of it does come back to that, especially when you have a coach who is so deeply involved in the game planning and all of that stuff, as you know that Belichick is. I just feel like that's such a big reason for their success. And so it'll be really interesting to see what Tom Brady does this year away from all of that. It's going to be really interesting. But anyways, that's enough Tom Brady talk. Like, I didn't want to talk about Tom Brady
I know,
ever
man.
again.
We will not talk about the Patriots or Brady again. I just had to give him a little shout out because I was excited because there was a possibility that Brady was going to go to the Colts.
Yes, that's where we were going.
Whew. So I'm bringing it full circle. So
okay.
I was excited because Brady wins. And then when it got down to it, I was like, do I really want him quarterback in the Colts? And I was like, I was interested to see how he would do with our line. He has a ton of weapons. Like, I think the Colts are poised to make a run. And then when I heard they got Rivers, I was just as happy because the guy hasn't been hurt. He can still sling it. And I think with this line, it's going to give him a little bit more comfort back there. And you're going to see how good of a quarterback. I know you know how good of a quarterback Philip Rivers is, but not a lot of people have seen it. And I think that had a lot to do with having no line.
Yeah, and there's two versions of Philip Rivers, dude.
Yeah.
There is the Jake Plummer version of Philip Rivers, who is the gunslinging, home run hitting, and home run missing, try to do it all himself quarterback. And then there is the Rivers who can play within himself, who is one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the league when he's playing that way. And it's really going to depend on, and I'm actually hoping that obviously he's familiar with a lot of the system because of Frank Reich, but I'm actually hoping that the new location and the fact that he does have new stuff that he has to learn will actually keep him in a place where he's playing smarter, because when he plays smarter, I still think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And he still has a fantastic arm, and he also is underrated when it comes to what he does at the line and the adjustments that he makes at the line of scrimmage. And I think it's going to be great for other people to see that. And I'm very excited about what he's going to do behind this line. I have super high expectations for Philip Rivers this year. And I don't know a ton about the Colts, so I don't know how good their defense is. I don't know the whole depth chart in terms of the Colts. And although I do like that kid Pittman that they drafted, and I think
yeah.
he could be. I mean, him and Ty, I think could be really special if this kid is ready for prime time as quickly as it looks like that he is ready for prime time.
I'm going to give you a name to watch. I'm going to give you a name to watch. Watch Paris Campbell.
Okay.
He's been hurt for the last couple of years. Burner, Ohio State kid, has had some injuries, but he is legit. I think he was their first round draft pick 2 or 3 years ago. But he's a phenomenal talent, and they're healthy. So you got Ty, Pittman, Paris Campbell, Jack Doyle, and you got Marlon Mack and James. Help me out here. Oh my gosh, I just went blank. Stewart from the running back they drafted. I'm sorry, he's not coming to my head. But the Colts are loaded around Phillip Rivers. The Colts on defense, this is probably one of their best defenses we've had.
Yep.
I'm calling it right now. I think the Colts win the South. They make a run. And if Rivers can just keep the turnovers down. I don't care if he throws picks. Because the one thing I do love about Rivers is, and you know this, is he's a killer. And there's not a lot of killers out there anymore. He's a gamer. He's 100%, a killer.
Dude.
And
100%. And that's the part that you love about his mentality is that he wants to destroy other teams. And he also never feels like he's out of it.
No.
And that's where and the problem with the Chargers that they often were in is that they were often either playing from behind or they were in really close games and time was running out and he felt like he had to win it.
He felt like he had to be perfect.
100%.
As a quarterback, when you have to play with that in your head that you have to be perfect, you can't play that way.
Yep. 100%. And so I think knowing that this is a team that because Marlon Mack is I actually drafted him on my fantasy team, so I'm very excited to see how he does in week 1 there. But I feel like to me the Colts feel balanced, and that's what I like about them this year. Like he doesn't have to throw for 300 yards a game for them to win. He can throw for 200 yards a game and a couple of touchdowns, and they're going to run for a couple, and they're going to be okay. The Chargers, on the other hand, I feel like their strength is their running game. So, coming into this year, you have Eckler, who I think is going to prove to be one of the best backs in the NFL this year. I think he is supremely underrated, and I am so excited for him to break out this year. Justin Jackson, who was hurt a little bit in camp, and also has had injuries over the past couple of years, I think is going to be they're going to be a great 1-2 punch this year because they're still. I don't know that they're going to use Eckler a ton down at the goal line and stuff like that. Although I think he can handle it. I mean, the kid is the strongest kid on the team, like literally the strongest kid on the Chargers, and so he's a beast, dude, and he's going to have a beast year. Justin Jackson's going to be great, and Joshua Kelly, the kid out of UCLA that they drafted, who also had a good camp. Those are their 3 running backs, and all 3 of them are going to see a lot of time this year. I think the Chargers attack is going to be predicated on the run because of this belief that Tyrod Taylor is more of a game manager than he is a quarterback that you're going to expect to go out and lead you to a win every single week. But I'm also going to say, and again, I'm biased, dude, I feel like Tyrod Taylor is going to really impress people this year.
I agree.
I liked him when he was with the Bills. I didn't think he got a good enough chance when he was with Cleveland. I feel like he's been around Anthony Lynn for a long time now, since the Buffalo days. And again, when he was in Buffalo, they didn't have the tools around him, and he didn't have a great line. I feel like he's better equipped to deal with the inconsistent line play that the Chargers have, because he is a more mobile quarterback. So I feel like that it's not going to be as many forcing throws downfield because he can move the ball with his feet. And so I think he's going to be okay. And he's going to give Herbert time to develop, because I am very high on Herbert. And actually, when the draft came around this year, he's the guy I wanted them to draft. Like, I was excited about them drafting Justin Herbert, and I'm excited about his future with the team. I don't think he's ready for week 1.
No.
And I would be okay with him not playing. If he doesn't play at all this year, it's going to be because the Chargers are playing well and Tyrod Taylor's playing well. And if that happens, then I'm perfectly fine with Herbert sitting out the entire season and just learning, or maybe getting in some garbage time, or maybe there's a meaningless game or two at the end of the season that he gets in and plays. If they stink right out of the gate and they really struggle, maybe he's in there by halfway through the season. Then the rest of it's going to be a learning year for him. But I'm happy that they're not throwing him in there right now, because I do feel like Tyrod Taylor is more than capable of being the quarterback for this team because of how good their receivers and just receiving in general. From Austin Eckler's a great pass catching running back. You got Hunter Henry, who when he's healthy is a top 5 tight end in this league. You've got Mike Williams and you've got Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, to me, might be the best receiver in the NFL. If not, is in the top 3 receivers in the NFL. Mike Williams,
if he stays healthy.
But and that's the same thing for Mike Williams. Now, Mike Williams, I think, is a fantastic number 2, 1,000-yard receiver. I still don't think we've seen the best season from Mike Williams yet. I think he's capable of being even better than he has been in the past. But again, he has to stay healthy. So, they've got great tools around him. And I feel like Tyrod is going to spread the ball around and really be able to take advantage of these guys around him. And so I'm excited about that. The thing about the Chargers, and it's the same thing every year, dude, is the freaking line. Guys getting hurt on the line. They brought over, I think it was Trey Turner and Brian Beluga were brought over to help shore up the line. Both of them are hurt right now. So... And I think it was Turner that was the other one that got hurt. And so it's like they may play still, but just the fact that you got to deal with these injuries, dude, is crazy to me. But the offense to me is what's shaky on this team. The defense, even after losing Derwin James, which is incredible to say, I still think is a killer defense. And one of the biggest reasons for that is them bringing Linval Joseph over to be their nose tackle this year, the guy from Minnesota, because he is an absolute beast. And where the Chargers have struggled on defense is in stopping the run. They have fantastic pass rushers in Bosa and Ingram. Their linebacking core now has Kenneth Murray, who I think is going to be lights out. Literally, like I feel like he could be another, Merriman style player with the energy that he brings. Like I'm just so excited to see him play this year. Chris Harris that they brought over from the Broncos, like their secondary is still super solid. Casey Hayward, Adderley, Jenkins, like their secondary is great. The biggest problem that I've seen them have in the past is not getting enough of a push up front, which makes it a lot tougher on that secondary. And now with Derwin James being gone, like they got to generate pressure and they got to be able to stop the run. And so having Joseph there in that nose tackle position, I think is really going to be great for them. Special teams, I think, are Badgley's Badgley. Desmond King, I think, is going to be returning kicks this year, so that'll be interesting to see. Although they did draft KJ Hill, so it'll be good to see what he can do, or if he ends up kind of getting a majority of the opportunities there. But I feel like they have the personnel of a playoff team.
Well, I mean, just from you giving the rundown, I'm a little concerned with the Chargers because they sound like they're pretty strong everywhere. And I think the one thing that people don't really talk about when you talk about a Tyrod Taylor, for instance, is you got to remember where this guy played. He played in Buffalo and he played in Cleveland. Two shitty weather cities. So as a quarterback, the one thing I hated was throwing a cold ball or a wet ball or getting hit when it's cold. Like Tyrod Taylor is going to LA. He's going to LA where the weather's always perfect. It doesn't rain. It doesn't snow. Like this kid can just come out to LA.
Now they're playing in the stadium. And so, SoFi Stadium, which is ridiculous.
It's beautiful. Listen, it's going to be interesting to see watching Tyrod Taylor play because I am a fan of Tyrod Taylor when he was in Buffalo. But no, dude, no one wants to quarterback in Buffalo. I don't care what anyone says. No one wants to quarterback in that cold, miserable weather. So I'm excited for Tyrod Taylor. I'm excited to see how the Chargers do this year. And I think I think they're going to be better than the experts are saying.
I do too, but I also think they could easily be as bad as the experts are saying.
For sure.
Like, it's one of those situations where they're either everybody's going to play to their potential and this team's going to, in the eyes of many, overachieve, or they're going to struggle. And I think if they do struggle, it's because of lack of leadership. Like now.
Which Phillip Rivers gave them.
100%, dude.
Yeah.
And Tyrod Taylor, watching Hard Knocks, really seems like he is a guy who has commanded the respect of everybody on that team, including Anthony Lynn. Good. And so he seems like he's ready to be that for this team. And I'll be excited to see it. But there was no question of Phillip Rivers' leadership, right? Because he was a very vocal leader. He was a very energetic guy. They have a lot of guys right now who are not the outspoken leaders on the team. They have a lot of guys who lead kind of by example. And that's either going to bring them together and they're going to see that everybody doubts us and they're going to come together and they're going to bond and they're going to be great, or they may struggle when times get tough because they don't have that. And so it's going to be real interesting to see how that chemistry of that team comes together. I liked what I saw in Hard Knocks this year, and I think they absolutely have the personnel to. I don't know that they're going to, beat Kansas City for the division title, but I could see them being in second place, and I could see them making the playoffs if they live up to their potential. And then anything can happen. For me, it's just get to the playoffs. And I think we'll know pretty quickly over the first few weeks whether or not this team is going to be playing up to its potential. Which kind of brings us to week one. And so week one, the Chargers are playing the Bengals, and you got Joe Burrow, who is making his first start for the Bengals. And I feel like this is the perfect time for the Chargers to get them, because I do think Burrow is going to be a good quarterback, but I think that this is his first game. They haven't had preseason games because of COVID and all that stuff. And so they are going to get to face a quarterback who is very likely going to be overwhelmed in week one. And This is the perfect time for them to face this Cincinnati team. And so I certainly hope, but I do expect the Chargers to beat the Bengals this week, even with a banged up line, because I think their running backs are good enough to create even when the line isn't playing as great as it could be, or if the line's a little bit banged up. And I just feel like the defense is going to be too much for Burrow, but we'll see. What do you think about the Colts in week one?
I'm with you on that game too. Colts. I want to talk about your Chargers again against the Bengals.
Yeah, let's stay there then.
Burrow coming out of college was one of my favorite players in a long time coming out of college, but I'm with you 100%. I don't think he's going to be able to do it. It's his first game. Chargers are just too tough. I think the Chargers will beat Burrow and the Bengals. Burrow's going to be good, but the Bengals are going to have a rough season this year.
But I wouldn't want to face him 8 or 9 games into the season, because I feel like once that kid gets his feet under him, he's going to be special. Yep. But now, like I said, I feel like this is the perfect time for them to face them. So go in there, get a good win, defense plays solid, work on all the things that you wanted to, like execute against the run, put a lot of pressure on this kid. You know that Bosa and Ingram are going to be hungry, and they're going to be looking, to notch a couple of sacks each on this first week of the season. And so I just feel like they're primed to overwhelm this team. Now, granted, if that game is close in the third quarter or the fourth quarter, then it's anybody's game. But I think I think for the Chargers, it's like get up early, put the pressure on them nonstop, and that team's just not going to be able to deal. And that's the game plan. It's just quick start, get up early, knock that kid around early, and really put the fear of God into him, and then, let the rest of the game take its course. And yeah, Bosa is an absolute beast. he's just incredible. Watching his technique, watching the way that he prepares, the way that he talks about the game. There are some great clips in the Hard Knocks thing. I would recommend, even if people are not a Chargers fan or a Rams fan, to check out the Hard Knocks series that was on HBO, because it really does give you some good insights into how these guys approach the game and stuff like that. So yeah, I expect big things out of Bosa this year. And Ingram, he's in a contract year. He just got his money guaranteed for this season, but I expect him to take it up a notch this year as well, and them to be absolutely brutal. But I think a lot of that depends on Linval Joseph in the middle. And can he be the disruptor? Can he be the guy who is, taking up double teams and really taking up that attention that's just going to free those guys up even more,
It's gonna be a fun game. Back to the Colts Jaguars. I don't even think this is gonna be a contest, Bry. I think the Colts are gonna wipe the field with them. This is Rivers' coming out party. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a massive Colts fan. It's just because they're playing Jacksonville. I don't have any confidence in the Jaguars. I don't think they can stop us. I don't even know if Minshew can score on us. This one's going to be a rout in my book. I think you're gonna be happy when the game's over and you see some of the numbers that Rivers puts up. I'm predicting a big game from him.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Because he owns the Jaguars. Like in the last few years, I forgot what his record was and how many points he's put up, but Chargers have just dismantled them, and I don't see it. I don't see a reason for that to stop again this year.
No, I fully expect the Colts to go out and dismantle the Jaguars in week 1. I do think Rivers is going to I expect him to play well. I expect him to execute well. I expect him to try to get everybody involved and to put in a really good showing in his first game out there. And I think that's going to be a fun one to watch. So yeah, I fully expect them to win.
Yeah, all he has to do is get it to his athletes, whether it's Mac, whether it's Campbell, Hilton, just get it to your athletes and let them do what they do.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I'm really worried about with him in that game is, again, and I have no reason to believe that he doesn't have command of that offense by now, is just miscues, right? If he,
sure.
Couple errant throws, couple bad miscues, maybe throws a couple interceptions. I don't expect that to happen. I expect him to come out firing, and I expect him to prove that he is ready to step right into this new team and be the leader. I mean, he's captain, not surprising that he was named one of the captains for the team, but
yep.
That's what I expect from Rivers. And as a huge fan of him, I expect him to come out and deliver. So yeah, not surprisingly, I guess we're both predicting victories for our teams on the first week of the season. Is there any other games? I mean, and we're a game in already. And I would say that in watching the Chiefs and the Texans last night, Mahomes picked up right where he left off last year. The Chiefs are a very scary team. And
they're scary.
They remind me of the Patriots. I actually think they're much more athletic than the previous Patriots teams that were good, but it's the level of execution that worries me. Like the level of execution.
I thought you were going to say they reminded you of the 91 Raiders.
No.
The Enfield Raiders. Oh, okay. No, all right.
No. I mean, Mahomes reminds me of you. I wouldn't say the whole team, reminds me of that. But what strikes me when I watch them is just the effortlessness of their execution. And that's what reminds me of those really good Patriots teams, is that it just felt inevitable that the throw was going to be made, the completion was going to be made, the first down was going to be gotten, that they were going to score on this drive. There's an inevitability to that is scary to watch. And that's where I'm looking at the Chargers team saying, man, the Chargers could be good this year. If they play to their potential, they could be a really good team this year. But what we're seeing from the Chiefs right now is another level. And you just get the sense with the Chiefs that if things keep going this way, they're going to be this way for a while. And we're going to be dealing with the Chiefs. We're going to be dealing with the Chiefs, maybe not dynasty, but the Chiefs being in that same spot that the Patriots were in for years, where it was like you knew that the road to success was going to go through this team. And because Texas is not a bad team. but they didn't look like they were playing. They were out of their league last night, and
Yes.
that's a good Texas team, and Deshaun Watson's a great quarterback, and their defense is pretty good, and they couldn't hang with the Chiefs. So, man, would I love to see the Chargers split that series with the Chiefs this year? If they could take 1 out of 2 and just keep themselves in the discussion when it gets down towards the end of the season, I would be happy with that. But
let's not forget the Colts beat the Chiefs last year.
Which is wild, dude.
It's wild.
And it's going to be awesome to see them go against each other this year, especially with Rivers there too, because Rivers obviously has no love for the Chiefs after being division rivals for so many years. So let's look at some of the other games that are coming. You got let's see, Patriots Dolphins. I mean, although the Dolphins are supposed to be halfway decent this year, but do I think they beat the Patriots in week 1? No. They're playing at the Patriots.
Listen, in that game, I'm only watching Cam Newton. I hope to see him having fun again.
Yeah.
He starts having fun again, and he's got that little swag back. Dude, the guy was an MVP, man. I think he still can play the game. He was in a shitty situation maybe the last 2 years. But from what I've seen lately, he's smiling. He's ready to play. I think Cam Newton could blow up this season, and that's what I'll watch during that game.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I am in the same boat. I mean, I am not rooting for the Patriots, but I am rooting for Cam Newton to be healthy and to be enjoying football again, because, man, it looked like he really wasn't, in recent years. The Eagles and Washington, I expect the Eagles to crush them. Washington's going to be not good this year. Packers and Vikings. I really haven't heard much about Aaron Rodgers in the offseason. It's almost like people feel like the Packers are kind of done.
Well, yeah, which is sad, because if you think about the quarterback position, the gunslinger is dying. And I think our last 2 gunslingers that we have are Aaron Rodgers and Phillip Rivers.
Yep.
Ben Roethlisberger too, he's a little different, but as far as gunslinging, I'm coming out to kill you type mentality quarterbacks, we don't have a lot left, man. And I'm rooting for Aaron Rodgers. I like Aaron Rodgers. I just don't think he has enough around him. I think Minnesota kills him.
Well, and that's really why I think nobody's really expecting too much from the Packers, is because they didn't really do anything around him in the offseason to get better.
They drafted a quarterback.
Right. And the message that sent, obviously, with that. But to draft a quarterback and to not get the rest of the team better around Aaron Rodgers right now is why I think a lot of people are kind of writing him off.
Yeah, man, it's stupid. I'm sorry. I tend to talk about the quarterbacks. We're some of the biggest prima donnas out there, and I could care less if anyone says, oh, no, they're not. But we are, and we're sensitive. And I think when you're Aaron Rodgers and you've given that city so much success, and he's another one that they really haven't built a team around, to draft a quarterback, it's a slap in the face. Dude. It's a slap in the face, and he's so pissed. I don't care what anyone says. He's pissed. He could come out and say, you know what, I'm coming out and I'm just chucking the ball.
He could come out and put that team on his back and just start throwing it down people's throats. And the thing is, dude, you and I both know, if you ask, do you believe that Aaron Rodgers in his mind still thinks he's the best quarterback in this league?
100%.
100%. Just like Tom Brady does, just like Phillip Rivers does. All these guys. And you're right. But that goes with the position. I don't even think it's a prima donna thing. I think it's more of you have to be that to play that position.
Right.
You have to believe that you are capable of putting that team on your back and willing them to victory. And I think Aaron Rodgers still believes that about himself. So it'll be an interesting game. But I don't think they hang with the Vikings in that one. You got the Bears and the Lions. I don't know about that one, the Bears and the Lions.
Trubisky, not a fan. I don't.
No, me neither.
But their defense is great. I could care less about that game. I think the Lions win. I think Stafford beats them.
Stafford's another guy I feel like, hasn't achieved to the level that he could achieve at, but maybe also hasn't had the team around him to be able to do that either. So
right, we'll see how they do. This is a good year for the Lions. Patricia, Stafford. The Lions could surprise you. That's a team to watch for me anyways.
What about the Raiders and the Panthers?
Listen to me. I hate the Raiders almost as much as I hate the Patriots. So I'm not even talking about the Raiders. I don't like them. Nope, I'm not talking about them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Chargers fan, dude, so you're not
I know.
going to
Don't
catch me
talk
rooting
about
for
the
the
Raiders.
Raiders.
We're not talking about them.
All right, it's Panthers in that one. Moving on, Jets and Bills. I'm going to go with the Bills in this one.
Oh,
I
I
have a
think
soft spot for the Bills. Like I said, I did like Tyrod Taylor when he played there. I actually, one of my buddies that I lived with for a few years, and when I got out of college, knew a lot. He was the Bills fan that I knew, and so he was the Bills guy. And in fact, I watched the game where they got beat by Tennessee. What do they call
miracle,
that?
the Super Bowl,
Miracle.
the miracle. Yeah.
Yeah. I was watching that game with him and watched his heartbreak live happen right before my eyes. But and who doesn't love the Bills Mafia? Like, who doesn't love a fan base that throws each other through burning tables like it's an ECW match in the parking lot before the game and stuff like that? I love that stuff, and so I'm rooting for the Bills in that one.
The best arm in the league, maybe too, with Allen. So I am rooting for the Bills. I think the Bills will handle their business.
What about the Browns and the Ravens?
Ravens will
destroy
dismantle them. Yeah, they're going to
destroy them. I have Lamar on my fantasy team, so I'm hoping that comes true.
Oh man, I'm so happy for that kid. When he got drafted, he got drafted late, and I think he had a pretty significant injury. And for him to blow up, man, I'm so happy. I'm a fan of him, and I hope they dismantle the Browns.
One of the better games of Sunday might be the Seahawks and the Falcons. That could be a really interesting game.
Listen, are these guys too old? Are they too old for us to consider a threat to the Super Bowl? You got Matt Ryan and you have Russell Wilson. Great quarterbacks. But has their time come and passed? Like, do they have a legit shot to make it?
I feel like Russell Wilson still does. But on the flip side, I feel like Matt Ryan has Julio Jones. And now Todd Gurley. And so a potentially healthy Todd Gurley, even though he was having some knee problems in camp and stuff like that. But could the Falcons overachieve? Yeah. The Seahawks, I think, are going to be good. So I think just baseline expectations, I would expect the Seahawks to win this game. But I think the Falcons, if I'm thinking of like which team feels older, to me it feels like the Falcons are older, and it feels like the Seahawks are still capable of being a really good team. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, heck yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Seahawks there. I don't have as high a hope for the Falcons, but.
So I'm going to go against you. I'm going with Matty Ice. I'm going to take the Falcons this week.
Okay. Taking the Boston College kid. Okay. I am. That's fine. We already talked about the Chargers. Let's see. Cardinals, 49ers. I mean, I would expect the 49ers to put a pretty big hurting on the Cardinals.
Listen, that's what I think the majority of people will think. You got to watch out for Kyler Murray, man. I watched him all year last year, and he's the real deal. He is explosive. He's a leader, can make the throws. He can run. If he keeps the ball from the Niners, like, the Cardinals could squeak this one out. I know you think I'm crazy.
I don't think you're crazy because I don't think that Garoppolo is a good quarterback. Like, I think he's mediocre at best, dude. But I just feel like their defense is beastly. And so, beastly. If the Cardinals can be poised, maybe they can.
It's going to be interesting to see how Murray and Hopkins work together.
Well, I think you hit on it. If they can keep the ball out of the 49ers' hands, right? If they can wear down that defense, especially in the first half, and open things up in the second half, then I think they have an opportunity there. But I think if the defense comes out dominant from the beginning, it's going to be a tough day for Arizona.
I'm going Niners. I'm with you 100%.
By the way, we'll forget all these picks. We're not writing them down or anything like that.
We'll have to go back and just listen.
When it comes back, it'll be like, oh yeah, didn't we say that the Cardinals were going to win that one? Then we have the Buccaneers and the Saints. And no, it's not an ooh for me. This is 100% Saints for me because number one, Drew Brees will always be a San Diego Charger. Number two, I don't like Tom Brady.
I know you don't.
And number three, I still think the Saints can contend, even though I would put the Saints in a similar category that we talked about with like the Falcons, right? Like, is he too old now? Are they too old? Are they still going to be right there? I think they could still be right there. I don't know enough about the Saints defense, but I know as long as they have Drew Brees, they're going to be in games, period.
Until you beat them, I'm going with Brady and the Bucks.
Okay, well, we can agree to disagree on that. And then the evening game, I guess, is the Cowboys and the Rams. And I can never bring myself to acknowledge the Rams with those awful uniforms.
No, you can't, and neither can I.
I mean, on that alone, when you looked at the uniforms that the Chargers rolled out, and let's just give credit where credit's due, not only have the Chargers had the best uniforms in the NFL for the entirety of their existence. In fact, the only time I felt like they were even threatened was when Tampa Bay was rocking the tangerine uniforms. That almost came close to touching what the Chargers do. But when the Chargers rolled out their new uniforms this year, and the way they rolled them out was perfection. And then you had the Rams come out with those god-awful, horrendous, like, it almost looks like they have on their numbers, it almost looks like they have like gel inside the numbers.
I know.
And it's like a lava lamp effect that they have. It's so bad, dude. I feel terrible for that whole team. Their logo, the new logo design, like, you couldn't have gotten that more wrong. You could not have gotten that more wrong than you got it.
They missed it.
It's like something out of 1995. It's just absolutely horrendous. The Cowboys, I expect to be good this year, and
the Cowboys will be there at the end. Yep.
I guess for the Rams, to me, it comes down to what is the version of Goff that we see this year.
Yeah.
Is he? Because last year, not impressive. This year, we'll see. Is this team ready to roll? They have Jalen Ramsey, obviously. It'll be interesting to see how they look against the Cowboys, but I think the Cowboys, to me, should absolutely win this game. And then on Monday, we got two games. We got the Steelers and the Giants. I'm picking Giants in this one.
It's the return of Ben. But again, two quarterbacks I really like. Where is it, Bri? Is it in New York?
It is in New York.
Oh, man. I'm going Pittsburgh. I think Roethlisberger brings his. I think Roethlisberger this year will have his team right there at the end with the Chiefs when it's all said and done. I think the Steelers are going to be there in the end, Final Four.
Well, the Steelers, being that you always think of them as a very physical team, right? I think that the only way you're going to beat the Chiefs this year is to be extremely physical with them.
Yep.
And this is a problem I had with how people played the Patriots for years. It's like the people would get scared, and so they would play off, and they would give them too much of a cushion, and then Tom Brady would just surgically dissect you on the way down the field because you were not generating any pressure and you were not bumping these guys on the line and disrupting their timing or anything like that. And I feel like that's how people play the Chiefs because they're so scared of their deep weapons that they're always playing them tentative as opposed to just constantly hitting them, constantly
punching
beating
in the face. That's what the Colts did last year. They beat them in all areas of the game. And our offensive line dominated their defensive line. We ran all over them. You got to punch the Chiefs in the face, and you got to keep doing it.
And to talk about the Chargers for a second, to bring it back to the Chargers, like that is the one knock I have on the Chargers defense is the lack of physicality. I feel like the Chargers, for as talented of a defense as they have had, they're like a finesse defense. They're a speed defense. They're a finesse defense. But they're not a defense that people are physically afraid of. And I'm wondering if Linval Joseph can change that and give them a more physical, presence and a more just a nastier presence. Because I feel like they're almost like a finesse. They're almost like built on speed now. You know what I mean? And technique. And so they're like a really technically proficient defense, but they're not a defense like when I say Steelers and you think of like punishment,
Right.
I don't feel like people think of the Chargers defense as a punishing defense. I feel like people think about them as a talented defense, and those are different things to me. And I feel like if the Chargers can get nasty this year and they can get punishing, then maybe they can hang with the Chiefs. But that's what it's going to take. It's going to take the same thing that it would take to beat the Patriots, which is you got to disrupt their timing, you got to beat them up. You got to physically wear them down. And if you don't do that, they're just going to have a field day.
Agreed.
And so are the Steelers that type of team this year? Are the Steelers going to bring that level of physicality this year? We'll see. But I think the Giants could be a little bit underrated. So I'm going to root for the Giants this week. And then the late game is the Titans and the Broncos. And obviously, I'm not rooting for the Broncos, so it's Titans all the way for me.
Look, you got to start rooting for the Broncos because you're a Colts fan now, and the Titans play in our division, so you want the Broncos to win.
Oh shit! I didn't even think about that. I don't know if I can reconcile that, but the Broncos play in the Chargers division, so that's going to have to be a push for us. Like
all
we're
right,
just going to have to not.
I'm going Broncos. I can't. I gotta root against the Titans.
Yeah.
Although I do like Vrabel, great coach. I liked what he did last year in the playoffs.
I did too.
He was fantastic. So I think the Titans are going to win. I'm going with the Broncos.
Yeah. The Chargers need whatever help they can get. See, and here's why I'm going with the Titans here, because I think the Colts have an easier path to the playoffs because they are going to be I think they have the pieces in place to be really solid and really consistent. I feel like the Chargers are going to have ups and downs this season, and so we need our division rivals to lose. And so I need the Broncos to lose. I need somebody's got to beat the Chiefs for crying out loud. Obviously want the Raiders to lose. So we'll see. So that's just a run through this week's games. Again, just kind of picking off the top of our head, not looking at any injury reports, not looking at any actual scouting reports or anything like that, which feels about right.
Bet on the quarterbacks, man. Always take the quarterbacks. That's where it comes down to. Quarterbacks and coaching. That's my philosophy.
We are both picking Colts and Chargers to win this week.
Yep.
We just ran through the other ones. Give me one draft pick that the Colts made this offseason that you think is going to have a decent impact in the game this weekend.
Well, I would say, God, I can't think of his name, and it's the running back or Pittman, but I'm not. Like, I think what the Colts did with their first round draft pick and getting Buckner from San Francisco was my favorite move they made all year. And I think with Buckner and Leonard on that defense, watch out. With Houston, they're loaded on defense. So I liked what they did with their first round pick. They traded it away. They got Buckner. They upgraded their D. And here's my big prediction for the Colts defense this year, top 5 in the league.
Are you thinking of Jonathan Taylor? Their rookie from Wisconsin?
Yes.
Okay. So they're a kid out of Wisconsin who's listed as the number 2 on the depth chart right now, but you're thinking he's going to get a good amount of work alongside Marlon Mack?
I do. Marlon Mack is in a contract year. They're probably not going to re-sign him. They're going to give this kid some work, and they're going to see what he can do. But Mack is legit running back 1,
Yeah.
But it just all comes down to if he's going to play with them next year, and if he's not, they're probably just going to give the carries to Taylor.
Interesting. Okay, so for the Chargers, I am going to say that I think Kenneth Murray is going to have a big impact on this game. I think I'm very interested to see how he comes out this week because, again, he's got so much talent around him. He doesn't have to be the hero right away. He just has to be a tackle machine. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how he does. And then I don't know how much KJ Hill, the wide receiver, is going to get in terms of action, but I would like to see him do something as well. But for me, of the rookie class, I feel like Kenneth Murray and Joshua Kelly. Like I don't know how much he's going to get in the mix. We're going to find out real early. We're going to find out real early if it's going to be a three-headed monster or a two-headed monster for the running back situation in LA, because I feel like Eckler is a legit number one, but the prevailing wisdom is that they're going to mix it up a lot with him and Justin Jackson. And people are feeling like Joshua Kelly's going to really get in the mix as well. So, but I just don't know how many touches he's going to get in week one. So I think of that rookie class, Kenneth Murray is the one that's going to have the most immediate impact on week one. But we'll see.
I like it. I'm going to watch the Chargers this week, man.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap up the very first episode of Bolts and Colts. In fact, episode 0. It's kind of our season preview episode. So hopefully this is edited and up before all the Sunday games hit. And then what we're probably going to do is record after the weekend's games sometime early in the week and get that up by the end of the week, so that each week before the games you'll have the new episode. We'll have reflected on the past week. We'll have talked about how each of the teams have done. Again, talk about the other games that are going on, and also worked in a little bit of fantasy football talk as well. But very interested to hear what people think. And I think, I don't know, maybe we set up a Facebook group for people to chat about the show, or I may set up a Twitter account right now. Right now, though, if you're listening to the show and there are specific things that you want us to talk about in the show, or I would love to hear people's perspectives on like why they're following, if they are Phillip Rivers fans that kind of followed over to the Colts, if they are Chargers fans who boycotted after they moved out of San Diego. Like, I would love to hear some more stories around that. You can send an email to brian@cbrianwright.com. That'll be the email that we use right now. We may change that up if we make one specifically for the show, but that will be a good place to send feedback for now. And until then, I think we're going to wrap this one up, Bri. So from Brian and Brian, have a good rest of your week. Enjoy the games on Sunday, and we will talk to you soon.